You're listening to the Business and BBQ Podcast, hosted by Tim Harridge. Tim Harridge is an active entrepreneur who built and sold 6 companies by the age of 40 and enjoys sharing the ups and downs of business and entrepreneur life. As for the barbecue, that's just something he has a passion for and likes to share as well. Here's your host, Tim Harridge.
All right. What's cooking, everybody? Tim Harridge here, back with season 2 of the Business and BBQ Podcast. Thank you for tuning back in. Sorry we've been gone for a couple weeks. We're going to break this podcast up into seasons. I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I didn't take time for my family. But now my son is at college. Football season has begun. The holidays are past. Technically, they say summer is over, although trust me, in Texas, it is not. But here we go. Season 2, the Business and BBQ Podcast. Today, you will meet one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He is a giving man. He is a man who has helped me in more ways than I can count. He has helped me at every business I've run. He's a wonderful coffee guest. He is full of practical knowledge. He has helped me make myself a better business owner and entrepreneur. Stick around. We'll be right back. I cannot wait to introduce you to Ken.
Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/TH and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a free title and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/TH today. Get started with your free trial and claim your one free audiobook.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Tim Harridge here with my good friend, Ken Channell. Ken, say hello.
Hello.
So, as I said before, Ken is one of the most interesting human beings I've ever met. Ken, why don't you just take a minute, tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
All right, I can do that. Well, starting here and going back, I guess, I have spent 40 years in real estate franchising. I did 18 years at ERA in the franchise business. I ended up being senior vice president of marketing there, and then I came to Homebusters, and I've done 20 years there.
Wow.
And I was co-president for 8 years, and then I now do training, but it pretty much retired from that business. But my passion through all of that has been interested in why people do what they do. So that's what got me on the road of trying to understand people and what they do.
And you have how many doctorates?
I don't have doctorates, but I have masters. I did. The right context for this is that I graduated from high school with a D average. And then I went on to do a bachelor's in English and philosophy. And then I got a master's of divinity from Duke University. And then I did a master's of arts in college teaching, and I taught sociology and anthropology in Palm Beach Junior College in Belle Glade, Florida. I taught the children of the migrant farm workers, and I was teaching them sociology and anthropology, and they looked at me like, I have no idea why you're telling me this. All I know is my mama told me to get over here and go to this school. So in the process of doing that, I got a real estate license, and I actually sold real estate for almost a year, and that's when I got into franchising, and I came to Dallas in 1978.
Was the year I was born.
The Gallery of Home. Yeah, how about that? You know, my real passion has been kind of theology, psychology, and sociology, I'd say. Those are my 3 things.
I think that's important the way you say that, because it's your real passion. And all too often we work, people that I've known and entrepreneurs, we work in this area or industry or role where we're good at something, but we're not passionate about it.
Right.
And I think I've spent, although I'm only 41, I've spent a large portion of my life doing things I'm good at, but not things that I'm passionate about. So you've lived on a boat, you've lived on an RV, you've lived in a bus, and now, like, I think you said that you can't wait to live in the RV again, or like,
that's right. I'm ready to hit the road. You know, my wife and I were so fortunate that when we were both 39 years old, we decided that we would quit. And I was working for company that would let you take a year off, and they'd guarantee you a job when you came back.
Right.
So we took off and made it almost a year, made it till the money ran out, and then we came back to work and spent 15 years in Kansas City. That's when I was with ERA. But that was an amazing experience. That was before we had any children. We now have 4, but we got our first child when we were both 46 years old.
Well, children can definitely change the best of intentions, right? As we both know. So let's just
kind of dive right into entrepreneurs, typically those of us, which I would imagine in a franchising business, ERA, home investors, just it doesn't even matter to real estate. The franchising business, you're dealing with a lot of entrepreneurs, right?
That's one of the things about real estate. Real estate has provided a opportunity for people who have that entrepreneurial makeup, that talent to do something that they want to do. So I first on the brokerage side and the investment side are two totally different animals. But on the brokerage side, I got to spend all those years working with people who wanted to start a brokerage company and then have agents and watch the agents perform. And so that's really what's been interesting to me, is tying personality to performance. Right. And I think there's definitely a connection there.
Well, I've sat in a lot of your home investors training classes. I never sat in any ERA ones, but I remember around the room, there were always so many people that had never bought a house.
Yes.
And there were so many people that weren't in the real estate industry. You had people that used to own sandwich franchises or corporate refugees, as I think you call them. Talk a little bit about the makeup of an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Just talk a little bit.
At the emotional level, you can have somebody who is created or wired to be an entrepreneur. And that means that they have that combination of needing to get results, which the way they define that is to make money in this environment, right? And that's how they judge. Did I get any results? Well, how much money did you make?
Right.
But then that same person can have within them a need to make things better tomorrow than they are today. So in that particular emotional combination, you always have a tension between getting things done and getting them done better. And so that's where that red and blue kind of just is on a seesaw. It's kind of a different seesaw, because you say, well, I think there's a better way to do it. So the challenge for the blue is always that they have a tendency to reinvent the wheel, because if they've got red, it's not happening fast enough. And when it's not happening fast enough, you go, well, there must be a secret to it. Nobody's told me about yet. Right. And so then always use the, we live here in Texas, so we have interstate, and then you have a farm to market road, and then you have a county road. Well, when the interstate doesn't seem to be working, people get off on the farm to market road. When that doesn't work, they get on the county road. And as you know, when you get on the county road, it's not even paved.
No.
Right? And they call and they say, this is not working. And I always say, tell me where you are.
Yes. A lot of times we don't know as entrepreneurs. That's right. So I'll back up a little. You're talking about red and blue. Yeah. Can you just give kind of a high level view of the way you think people operate and the different levels and the different categories?
Yep. The colors. Okay. So the levels are how you act, which I call now the advantage, is what you're the best at. And that all gets shaped by the time you're about 15, okay. And what the brain researchers say is that the 15-year-old has about a half dozen T1 lines in their head that are always their best play. And everything else is a dial-up connection. So the more you can zero in on what those T1s are, and that's a lot about what your journey's been, is to figure out where are my T1s, because you've done a lot of things. See, and here's how you know the difference. When you're doing something you have an advantage to do, it energizes you. And when you're energized, all the people around you are energized. When you have to do something that you don't have an advantage to do, it drains you. Right. And when you're drained, the people around you are drained. That's right, exactly. So the more we can get people to focus on what they really have an advantage to do and spend more of their day doing that, the better it is. So that's how you act. The second level is how you think. And that happens between when you're born and when you're about 6 years old. And that's what you get from your parents. And what most parents know is that whatever they give their children, they tend to develop the opposite. So if you're very organized, you raise kids who are not, because why do they need to be? You are, right? So, and that really is designed that way so that we get some, not so much like the same thing over and over. That also, I always say that's why grandkids and grandparents get along so well together, because they say to each other, I'm okay, you're okay, what's with them? Well, what's with them is the transition people, the parents are, because they help go the other direction some. So that's how you think, but it's also very important in building a team because it's how you communicate. So that tells me how a person likes to get information. Right. So that's very helpful. And then the first level is how you feel. And you're born with that. And so that's why you do what you do. That's what drives you. It's also what protects you, because it has both a positive and a negative, So when somebody comes at you, that emotion is always going to take over if it gets intense enough. And so those are the 3 levels: advantage, thinking, and feeling. And then the 4 colors are red, are doers, and they focus on getting results. And as I say, generally, they need to make money. And no matter how much money they made, they need to make
more.
That's right. Exactly. And so yesterday would have been good, but it's gone. So we got to do it today. Then the second color is yellow, and they're talkers and they are connectors, and they have a need to do things with people. And so they never like it if they win and the team loses. They want the team to win because they're into celebration and recognition.
Right.
See, and they've been known to have a party, and parties are always more fun with lots of people rather than no people. You can have a party in front of the mirror, but it's not, it just doesn't have the same. And so that's the red and the yellow, and those are both externally oriented. The other 2 colors, blue and blues, as I said, I think earlier, they are focused on how do I make tomorrow better than today. And I call them researchers because they are always looking for, well, we could do this, but what if we did this? So they're always comparing this alternative to this one to this one. And that's what I've got a lot of that. So, and they're into freedom. See, that's why they want to go on the road. Have that freedom. And then the last color is green, and they are into control. I call them regulators, because they like to regulate things. And the number one thing, Tim, I've learned about greens is they hate making the same mistake twice. And so everything that comes at them, they look at through a filter. Did I do this before and I make a mistake, and is this about to cause me to make another mistake? And so they always take more time to make decisions because they have to figure out, is this going to get me in trouble?
Right.
And so they don't like that. So those are the 4 colors, and the 4 colors are different in every level. When you take the assessment, you find out that you can be one color in the advantage, another color in the how you think, and another color in how you feel.
So I love the system. I always have, as you know. And I think it's definitely helped me not only in my business, but in my marriage, because all these things, these advantages, these thinking, these feelings and action or talking, and just, I think, like you said, that our children end up in that kind of think level being a little bit different than us. Well, I feel like I married someone that was really different than me in that feel level. Yeah. And so I think talk a little bit about how in sales or in management of a business, which I think is a lot of times just sales, you're trying to get people to do what you need them to do. No question. How does it help in communicating and leading when you actually can kind of step outside of yourself and understand the way the other person needs to be talked to?
Yeah. So I learned a long time ago that the first thing people are interested in is themselves. So I always talk to them about the way they're wired, right? Right. But the truth is, that's not as important as understanding the way the people around you are wired, because they're the ones that are going to help you get things done that are more than what you could do by yourself. And so the important thing about communicating with other people in a management situation, a sales situation, whatever the situation is that yellow, people with 5 or more yellow in their profile, they want to be involved. So all you ever have to say to them is, I need your help. And they go, what? Because they do not want to be left out. And they never want to hear from somebody else what they thought they should have heard from the person they should have heard it from, because they go, what else aren't they telling me? And if there's a meeting going on and they walk by the room where the meeting's going on and they look in there and they say, well, why didn't they invite me to that meeting? So what's interesting is that the whole social media thing came up with this thing about FOMO, and that's the fear of missing out. Right. Well, the yellows have that disease in spades, isn't it? They've got it down, man, because they don't want to be left out. So that's all about who. In any situation, you got to start with who. Because if you're going to get anything done, you're going to get it done through people, right?
That's right.
And so then the second color that you focus on is blue, and that is, why are we doing this thing? What if we did this? And so people like you and me who have that blue, we actually learn from other people's response to our ideas. So you take an idea and you throw it at somebody and you learn from the way it comes back. Doesn't mean you intend to do it. You're saying, what if I did that? So you say, we're going north, and the person you're talking to goes, well, good, that sounds good. 3 minutes later, you say, we're going south. 3 minutes later, we're going east. 3 minutes later, we're going west. Well, you're not going to any of those places. You're saying, what if I go to those places? So blue is about why. It's comparing A to B, A to C, A to D. The best alternative is what that's about. And what you learn very early on is you can't play pitch with people who don't have blue because they take you literally. If you say we're going north, the red person gets up and starts out the door and they're gone. If you say that to a green person, the green person starts making a list of things they would have to have in order to be ready to go north. See, and they didn't even hear that you were going south. So it starts with who, moves to why, and the next thing is what. And the people who have red in the way they think, they want to know, what are we doing? And they have no patience with people who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
For somebody to say to them, whatever, they go, no, it's not whatever. What are we doing? And so a red parent, which is has children, the first time one of their kids say to them, whatever, the red parent says, come here, you have choices. That ain't one of them. Because they, not whatever, what are we doing?
Right.
And what you can't do with reds, if they have no blue, is you can't give them too many choices. They always work best if you give them A or B. We could either do A or B. Which one you want to? They might come up with C, but they're not into that. And then the fourth green is about how. And they're process thinkers. See, they think in steps. First, you got to do this. Second, you got to do this. Third, you got to do this. Fourth, you got to do this. And they always take more time, which is very troubling for a red because they don't have time. And because it takes time to think through the process. So as it turns out, all four of those colors are valuable to a team because you need to get people involved. You need to pick the best choice. You need to get some focus and direction. And then you need to go, how are we going to get that done?
Right.
What's the process?
You could almost break a meeting down by that, right? Talk about how you've seen people using this type of system overcome their weaknesses or work around them.
Or recruit people who have a strength where you have a weakness. That was the whole concept of having an assistant, administrative assistant. Anyone who's ever had a really good administrative assistant will tell you that person double, triple, maybe 4 times their results because they didn't have to worry about those details. Right. And a person who doesn't have green in the advantage, they can't even imagine that somebody would enjoy doing accounting. But the truth is, green people love it. My account balance. And you go, woohoo. What you need is more money. That's right. So it's very helpful. The way you have to go back and figure out how that all got started of improving people's weaknesses. And it goes back about 150 years because it started with the Industrial Revolution, where they were building things that required a nut to be put on a boat. Right. And see, if I need you to 12 hours a day put a nut on a boat, it doesn't matter what color you are. I just need more nuts on my boat here, right? Yeah, right? And so people got the idea, okay, so we'll train people to do that. And so training for over 100 years was based on, and still to some degree is based on, trying to improve a weakness. But here's what I've learned. If you work on a weakness, you end up with a strong weakness. but it's still a weakness. It doesn't.
Well, that is one of those quotes that I'm going to highlight later, because if you work on a weakness, you end up with a strong weakness. And talk a little bit about making sure that those advantages, right, in your scale don't become a trap. Like you don't get trapped into doing something you're good at, but maybe you don't enjoy.
Yeah. I have really had a real clear insight into this difference between red yellows and red blues. Okay. So a blue can go to a meeting and they can be happy talking to one person for 45 minutes about something that matters. A red yellow goes to the same meeting. They're happy talking to 45 people for 1 minute to see if anybody in the room has any money. So the two of them get in the car to go back, and the blue says, you won't believe what I found out in there. And they tell you 20 minutes about this idea that they got from this person, right? The red yellow says there were 3 people in that room that had any money. And the favorite word of a red yellow is next. And so the trap for the red yellow is when they can be successful making money at something, they want to some degree, the red wants to keep doing it to get the money, but the red yellow is looking for next. And it's not ever just next house. its next opportunity. What else could I do? And see, that's where the blue thinking comes in. You can't help but think about what other things could I do that would make me $20,000 that I wouldn't have to go do the things I don't enjoy doing.
So talk about shifting gears. Earlier you said shifting gears, and it's something that I've always used as a red flag when I'm operating at a good level and I'm thinking right. Talk about what makes someone go from like the advantage to the how they think, then down to how they feel, and how to identify maybe the traps there.
So think of that advantage like third gear in a standard shift car. Thinking is second gear and feeling is first gear. All right. Or another way of thinking, the advantage is freeway, thinking is service road, and feeling is parking lot.
Right.
Okay. So what happens to you, somebody asks you about details or hits you with a problem, you shift gears and you can hear yourself talking fast. Well, you're trying to buy time to figure out what you're going to do next. And when you have that blue, you also start looking for an exit. You go, I could go out that door. I could go out that window. I could get it. So you're trying to, but if people keep pushing you, then because of that yellow, you've been known to tell somebody off pretty good.
I have torched some bridges pretty quickly, many of which I regret.
Yes.
Many of which I could care less about.
Yes.
You always told me that when I get stressed out, you know, down in that parking lot area of how I feel, that I kind of knock my way out of problems instead of think my way out of problems.
That's right. And you try to tell them off. But if that doesn't work, then when you have red, life is simple. It's either me or you. It ain't going to be me. So unfortunately, that leaves you. On a way of thinking about that, when what's your youngest right now? He's 9. Somebody's messing with your kid and you've got a gun, pow.
Yes.
To a red. They don't think, should I do this? What do you think about what? No. Bing. Just like that.
What about a 10 red?
And a 10 red. Bing, bing. Yeah. Pow, pow. So what I've come to understand about this is the minute you hear yourself talking fast, you need to learn to say one other thing, which is, can I get back with you? I need to check with Jennifer.
Or anybody.
What if it's Jennifer that's got me talking fast?
Exactly. Then you say, I need to walk around the building. I think there's something out in the backyard I need to look at. Because if I buy time, I get to shift that reaction. See, yellow and red are a reaction, and you win the battle, but you lose the war.
Yeah.
You know, because here's what's amazing about that. When you really tell somebody else off, when you have yellow, you want to have influence. And sometimes when you tell people off, you lose influence with them. And then a red wants to be in charge and have power. And so sometimes when you take people out, then you lose you're not in charge. They come get you, you know, so just understanding that, avoiding, because there are people who try to get you to react. They push to try to get you to react.
So you said that if we're both operating kind of on the freeway and someone asked me, let's just say Jennifer, a detail I'm not ready for, like I can jump straight to the parking lot and skip the service road. And the problem with that is then I lose any ability to really think, and it's just more about action. Like you said, talking fast, and I do it all the time. How can people identify that and resolve it to where there's more productivity?
The first step is to learn to value and appreciate. There's a reason why there are 4 colors. The guy who designed this had something in mind. He said, you know, there might be a need to have somebody who focuses on getting something done. There might be a reason to have somebody who focuses on making things better and getting more out of the same opportunity. And we probably ought to be tracking this, you know, to see how we're doing. Well, it would be good if everybody kind of work together. That's what. So the reds are great at getting results. The blues are great at getting more results, expanding the opportunity. The greens are great at telling you how well you got, what kind of results you got, right. Which is usually not quite as good as what you thought. But the yellows are good at saying, you know what, we all need to be working together. That's really been my life in the corporate world. If you look at, I would have made a better college professor probably than I would have made a marketing guy or a co-president. But what I brought to the table was we got to understand how this works, and we got to understand people and what is a customer? What are they thinking? And in a sense, in a business, as you know now, you've had a lot of experience with that. People that work for you, They're kind of like volunteer customers, right? I mean, you either figure out what it is they're good at and help them get to do that. And that's been one of the exciting things I've watched is taking somebody out of a role that drained them and putting them in a role that energizes them. And it just, it's like day and night.
So talk about that. Talk about a couple of your more successful, maybe a story or two about times that this was applied in a business, and you don't have to say who or where.
Okay.
And just kind of like what you saw the transformation be like.
So we hired a person to be an administrative assistant, and we messed up because we didn't recognize that there was not any green in the advantage, which in an administrative assistant, you want somebody who crosses T's and dots I's, especially if you don't, right?
Yeah.
And so that person, we moved her around 2 or 3 different times, and we finally found her a role which was collections, because she was great at calling people and talking to them. And you didn't have to do a whole lot of details because the number was right here that you were trying to get. And she was red, and she said, but let's talk about the number. So that was one example. The second example was somebody that we hired to be more like a coach to coach franchisees, and just didn't quite take off. And then we put that person in charge of generating loans, really being a loan originator. Took off because he was a person who needed a goal. He said, tell me what the goal is. How much do we need to do this month? Right. And you give him that number, he was on it. So those are 2 top of the mind examples, but it's always an opportunity to use this information to figure out where could I put that person on my team. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes there's not a spot, but when there is a spot, it's a real win.
So you've known me now for 14 years or more. Why do you think all of a sudden, I mean, obviously I had some life events that kind of influenced it. Looking at my personality, why do you think I've started liking barbecue so much, or to barbecue specifically?
Mm-hmm. Definitely for you, there are 2 pieces to the puzzle. It is results. You saw something that you thought if you worked at it, you could get some results. But second, there's a social component to that. So when you go around to all these different places and you talk to people, you interview people, so it's kind of meeting a need for you to not only get results, but also to be part of something, to have influence in an area. Right. Because, how long have you been doing the barbecue thing?
Less than a year.
Less than a year. So 2 years ago, you had no influence in barbecue.
No. But 2 years ago, I would stop at several places that now I wouldn't be caught dead in.
And it's also, I noticed on your social media, how you are very interested in team sports, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's another thing that yellows really enjoy is participating and celebrating the win. And the red's the win, right? And the yellow is doing it together.
Right.
So I think both of those interests kind of gave you, to some degree, a kind of additional focus. Because the problems with being successful at something is that it only takes you so far, and then you look for something else. It's the mountain idea. Why do you climb mountains? You climb mountains so you can see the next mountain. So house buying was a mountain that there's no conversation about whether or not you got to the top of that mountain, right? So then when you got to the top of that mountain, you say, what else could I do? So I think that's the explanation for how you kind of were drawn to those 2 interests. Yeah.
So I found it interesting. You had talked about earlier with a red. It's like next. And the fun thing about barbecuing for me, Jennifer can't understand it. How I can stand down there for 12 hours to cook a piece of meat that may actually taste like garbage. Yes. Right. But like for me, like that all day challenge, like where you're fighting the fire and fighting the meat and fighting the wind and the rain, like I don't know, it just sets me. But then to sit down and share it with everyone later.
And if somebody happens to say, Tim, this is the best brisket I ever, that person gets their certificate.
I've already talked about that person several times in the last couple of days. Hey, so-and-so said this, I even called my son down in college to tell him, oh, hey, your Uncle John said it was perfect. Yeah, and then also you actually hit the nail on the head earlier and you don't even know it. With this podcast, I decided to start podcasting to fill that need of involvement and influence, because I also want to spend more time with my family. But the beautiful thing about this podcast is it can be done anywhere in the world. And even more specifically, I can actually do it way in advance and then just hit autoplay, right? Yeah. And the thing just kind of gets published and I can go travel or be with my family. And we're actually starting season 2 now. I decided to take a couple weeks off and it's been fun. And it's, like you said, it's a lot of it. It fills this need in me to be involved and influence out in the world. I don't want to go too long, but let's talk a little bit about someone's listening and they have a business or a marriage that could benefit from this, or if they just want to kind of understand who they are and what their advantages are and how they think and how they feel. So let's talk a little bit about what your Living Talent is in your program and how people can find out more about if they're a red, yellow, blue, or green.
Yes. So it's pretty simple. You go to that website and then you register. Answers, really, there are only a few questions that are required. And then you pay for a code and you get a code and then you go online and you take the assessment. The assessment takes 10 to 15 minutes. At the end of that process, you get a report that you can print, you can email to somebody, you can share with people. And as you know, it's very helpful if you not only take it, but you get somebody who you know well to take it. Because when you look at yours, you get some information, but when you look at Jennifer's, you get additional information. So it's very much and I think it makes an incredible graduation present. I think it makes an incredible marriage present, give it to people. My wife and I had been married maybe 2 or 3 years when we got this information, and it's definitely made a difference, for us to be. And we're very similar. First marriages tend to be opposite in the child. Second marriages tend to be more similar because the first marriages are hormonal and second marriages are more rational.
So I think for me, when I think about, I still have, while we're sitting here, I pulled up all the different versions of these profiles that I have from the different employees I've had, the different companies I've run. And I think that even if you're a solopreneur, right? And if you're just sitting there working by yourself, I think it's important to identify the things that are going to drain you.
Yes.
And making sure that you're not doing them. I think about some of the most, I'll say, profitable Homevestors guys that I knew back in the day. They may not have been viewed as the most successful,
right? Because
they weren't the red yellows up on the stage wanting all the recognition. Yeah. It was the red green guy or gal that counted every dollar and managed their rehabs to where they were always under budget and the house always sold for more.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it always sold for more, but it was way over budget. I think identifying what you should or shouldn't do with your daily life, I think it just leads to more happiness.
Yes.
Part of what, as you're talking about that, it makes me realize is that you basically were looking for an intellectual challenge. You pretty much worked every angle of the house buying business and even the industry. You figured out all the different ways that could work, but it wasn't feeding that itch.
Right.
And so that's a part of it. But interesting that you mentioned red greens, because there are more of those who buy the franchise than any other combination emotionally, red greens. But here's what I've observed. Reds need to make money. Greens need to have money. No matter how much they made, the reds, they need to make more. No matter how much a green has, they need to have more. Well, here's their problem. They don't want to lose what they've made. And so they are risk averse. Right. This is not something that Tim is familiar with because he has no green and he's not risk averse. He's willing to just do it and we'll figure it out. Because really when you have red and yellow, if you have yellow, you figure out, well, if I get in trouble, I'll talk my way out. And if you have red, if I get in trouble, I'll knock my way out. But a green says, no, if you're in trouble, you're in trouble. So some of those people you're referring to, they were very good at the details emotionally. They had that covered. But what I've learned is that when people come into the business, especially our corporate refugee guys, and they've made some money, they struggle with risking that money.
Right.
Because they go, well, I don't know. I don't think it's working, And as you know, you don't spend money in that business, you don't make money.
Right.
And so I've been so fortunate to have that laboratory that I could look at where I knew how they were wired, and I meet with them when they first start, and then I watch how they perform. And the people who perform are primarily red yellows in the advantage, and usually red, yellow, or blue in the way they think, but they are red, green in the emotional makeup.
I look back at what I did with 2020, which in 2 years' time, we grew it to a $3 million a year revenue business, and it was going up. And when I look at it, the biggest mistake I made was letting go of the chief operating officer, which happened at a time where we had just incurred a lot of expenses and we had a partnership division, and because he was a red-green.
Yeah.
And what I realized looking back is I needed someone to run the company while I led the company.
Yeah.
Because as I started running the company, I was so in the details that I was never in a good mood.
Yes.
And that permeated throughout the floor, right? I mean, because happy Tim, positive Tim, loud Tim wasn't there anymore. Angry, upset Tim that had to do accounting today was there, right? And I look back at it and it created a culture that I'm not proud of, right? I mean, it created a culture of people that were like, I don't want to be here around this guy.
Yeah.
And you look back and you're like, man, it was toxic. Yeah. But it was toxic not because I treated people bad per se. It was toxic because I feel like we lost all direction and optimism.
Yeah.
Because Tim was in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to run it and lead it. And I don't feel like if your organization gets big enough, you can't run it and lead it. You've either got to lead it or run it, right? And the leader gets to be the cheerleader, right? While the person that's running it calls people in and fires them or counsels them or tells them they got to work all weekend and all that. So I made a lot of mistakes there. But I think the thing about this system is it's perfectly imperfect. And you start, and it's one of those things that I go back to as much as I can. Sometimes you wish you'd gone back to it before, but it modifies and changes as situations change, right? Yes. And one of the things you've always taught me is the quicker I can get back on the service road, if not the freeway.
Yes.
Even asking, you told me earlier, can I get back to you on that?
Yeah.
Just to take that stress off, to get back on that service, like then I become my more effective self, right? I get back into my living talent versus my stressful, angry talent, right? So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk to Ken about some things that he's passionate about. Start collecting more leads in minutes. Not only do I use HubSpot's free CRM, but I also use their free marketing tools. Start turning visitors into leads today. Sign up for free at HubSpot.com/TH. With HubSpot Marketing Free, you'll have everything you need to convert more visitors into leads. Sign up for free today and it's free forever. No contract or credit card required. It's a risk-free way to see what inbound marketing can do for you. Start turning visitors into leads today. Sign up for free at HubSpot.com/TH. All right, we're back. Ken, I know that you've been a guy that used to like to sleep on a boat when it was raining, when you had your sailboat over at Chandler's. I know you're looking at potentially relocating in the near future. Barbecue for me is a metaphor, right? It's the taking time for things in life that you enjoy, which is my children, which is the act of barbecuing. What are some things that you take time for? What's your barbecue in life, so to speak?
Yeah, so I guess I would have to say my barbecue in life is information. I mean, for 13 years, I drove from Rockwall to Dallas to work at Homebusters, and most of those days, I was listening to a podcast or listening to a book. I don't read books hardly ever anymore. I listen to books. And so whenever I listen to a book or a podcast, I always get ideas about how red, yellow, blue, and green applies to that. That's a filter that I always see. And just this week, I've been listening to, I think, 3 different podcasts about a new book that came out, and so immediately I see the connection and the application of red, yellow, blue, and green to that information. And so it's just, now that I'm more or less retired from a corporate environment, I have the freedom to explore this. That's my real passion, is to share this with as many people as I possibly can, because I feel like I've been given a gift of almost 40 years now of thinking in terms of red, yellow, blue, and green and acting thinking and feeling. And so I think that's a valuable thing to share and to make a difference. I guess that's at the end of the day. The other thing that I would say I'm passionate about is walking on the beach, so because that also kind of feeds that imagination.
I tell real estate investors all the time, because people will say, oh, I love this business. I love this business. I'm like, yeah, you don't. I mean, like, you love the result. That's right. You may love some popularity that comes with being Facebook famous, but the true test, I tell people all the time, is like, if you had 10 days to live, would you spend any of those days buying houses? Right? And everybody's like, well, no, I would walk on the beach. I would travel the world. Right? And so I'm glad you said walking on the beach, but I also know that you are a passionate man about helping and sharing with others. You invited me to Catalyst a couple years ago, and I think that I'm happy to see you kind of getting to focus more on this.
Yes.
Because it's always been, I don't even know your profile colors, but I know that when you got onto this part in training, like, someone was going to have to pull you off the stage, right? Because you were going to talk about it as long as possible. So, Ken, thank you for being here. The website is yourlivingtalent.com.
Yes.
It looks like they can just log in, buy a code.
Register, yeah.
It's about $100. It looks like they can take the test. They can contact you if someone's listening and has a company. They can get you to come out and work with their company.
I do seminars for people for the whole team. I did that for your team.
Yeah,
and so
several times.
Several different teams. And so that's really the best way. If the leadership, it's like anything else. If the leadership buys into this and uses it, then it becomes a tremendous tool for communication in an organization. Right. I think we ended up at Homevestors having one of the best team cultures for our whole organization because we integrated this idea in the whole business.
And we had a meet and eat a couple weeks ago at this restaurant, and people were asking me about hiring.
Yes.
And I was trying to tell them about this. And the way we used to hire when I owned the franchise, and Homevestors was great about creating systems for those that didn't have them. It was job description online, email, resume, send back profile, take profile, review profile. If it does not match the position you're hiring, move on. And I think there have been times that I've ignored that advice, and it almost always bites me in the backside because it's not, do they fit? You just said it. It's not just, do they fit that position? Do they fit the team that they're going to be joining? So if you're an entrepreneur out there, check out yourlivingtalent.com. At least get it for yourself, perhaps your significant other. If you have a team, I highly recommend you get it for your team. If you have a large company, reach out to Ken directly. Get him to your next corporate event, your next leadership event. You have my word. It will change the way your company works. That's it. We're out of time. Until next time, everybody, keep cooking.
Thanks for listening to the Business and BBQ Podcast. Make sure you check out our other episodes and stop by timharridge.com to say hi. We want to hear from you. Until next time, keep cooking.